How's it going, guys? It's K Cars, and in this video I wanted to talk to you guys about some of the overheating issues that I've had on my 2001 Jeep Cherokee XJ. So if you guys are pretty familiar with these old Jeeps, you'll know that they do have their overheating problems and issues, and I haven't really ran into anything serious until a few days ago. So let me go ahead and talk about what actually happened. If you guys have watched some of my previous videos, then you'll know that I mentioned that sometimes it kind of smells like it's smoking. I've had like smoke or steam come out of the front grille a few times before, but every time that has happened, the temperature gauge actually stayed at 210. So let me hop in and show you guys what I'm talking about. So 210 is right in the middle there. That's the normal operating temperature of this Jeep. And whenever those things have happened, like the smoke and the smell, whenever that's happened in the past, it stayed at 210. It wasn't actually overheating, so I didn't really think it was an issue until just a few days ago, like I said. So basically what happened with this Jeep a few days ago was that it was driven about 20 to 30 minutes in about 90-degree weather, and of course that is pretty hot. And basically the person who was driving it, she told me that she couldn't get it to go above 40 miles an hour, and it was making some pretty weird noises. So I got in the Jeep, started up, and it kind of sounded like it was about to stall out, about to die. I pressed on the gas, absolutely nothing was happening. I put it in neutral just to see what would happen, tried to give it some gas, put it in reverse, it kind of started moving, but I kind of just had to keep going back and forth between like neutral, reverse, and drive, trying to just keep giving it gas just so it wouldn't die. And then I also just tried turning it off, then turning it back on after waiting like a minute or so, and still the same thing happened. It kind of just sounded like it was about to die and stall out on me. And whenever that happened, the temperature gauge was actually above 210. That's when I knew that something was actually starting to be wrong, because I started to smell that same smell that I smelled before. There wasn't any smoke, fortunately, but the temperature was above 210, and I could smell that it was overheating. It was pretty hot. It wasn't anything terrible, like it wasn't in the red range. So if you look at the temperature gauge, see 210 is right in the middle. So I'd say it was probably on like that first mark right after 210. So of course nothing serious, nothing majorly wrong. It wasn't like in the red range like those last two marks you see. It was not in that range, fortunately. So it wasn't like major overheating or anything like that, and I wasn't really sure what to do at the time. But after a few tries of turning it off, turning it back on, going into neutral, just giving it some gas, it eventually started idling normally, and I could drive it normally too. So that's definitely good, but it's an issue that I do want to get taken care of. And I think today I finally figured out what is actually wrong, and it's actually a pretty simple fix. So I know one thing for sure, and there could be a few other things that could also be wrong with this Jeep, but let me go ahead and pop the hood and let's go ahead and talk about what's wrong with this thing. Before we talk about the cooling issues, I also wanted to talk about one of the issues I had with the hood not being able to latch. So whenever I would close the hood, like normally just drop it from a few inches, the driver's side right here, it would latch completely fine where it's supposed to. Same thing with the middle latch right here, that would latch on right there. But for some reason, the passenger side latch, it did not want to actually latch on to this little bar right here. So basically what happened is whenever I dropped the hood, it would latch on, but then immediately like unlatch itself, and then it was like flopping back and forth. So of course I didn't really want to drive it with that issue, because I didn't want the whole hood to fly open, of course. And I thought I had to replace this latch, which it wouldn't be a huge issue, but if I want to drive the Jeep, then I don't want to have to wait a few days for that part to come in the mail. So what I did is I actually just put a bunch of WD-40 up in there, sprayed all the moving parts, just waited like an hour, and then tried to shut it, and everything worked just fine. So if you're having a similar issue, I know that's also a pretty common issue with these old Jeeps, is that the hood doesn't want to latch. You could also try just spraying some WD-40 around all the moving parts, wait like an hour, and then try again. So that's what worked for me. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the cooling issue now. So basically with these old Jeeps, there's a lot of different components with the whole cooling system. Obviously the main part is the radiator, which is right over here in the front. Then you got the radiator cap right there. I'm not gonna like open this up or anything because it's pretty hot right now. I just drove it. Whenever I did check it, whenever the engine was cold. It wasn't even full. So that's probably one of the problems right there, is that I need to at least top off the coolant, but ideally I would like to get the whole coolant system flushed. So whenever I first got this Jeep, the first things that I did was replace all the fluids. So of course, oil, diff fluid, transmission fluid, transfer case fluid. The only fluid that I did not replace was the coolant. So that definitely needs to be done. So that's the number one thing that I noticed, is that the coolant was not full, needs to be topped off, ideally flushed. Next thing that I wanted to talk about, next part of the cooling system is of course the fans. So of course you have two fans, right over here, then right over here. So this fan is actually mechanical. I believe it actually always spins whenever the engine is running. Then the driver's side fan is an electric fan. I believe it kicks on anytime you turn on the AC or whenever the engine temperature goes above 218. Now, in my experience, anytime I use the AC, which was like twice in my whole like year and a half of owning this Jeep, the fan never actually turned on. Now I noticed, I kind of heard a sound where it was trying to spin, the fan was trying to turn on and everything, but it never actually sounded like the fan was spinning. Another test that you can do is actually, you can pull off this little temperature sensor off of the thermostat housing. And once you pull that off, the electric fan should turn on, just because, like I said, it should turn on whenever the engine temperature goes above 218. And if the computer doesn't know what temperature it's at, then it's gonna automatically turn it on. So that's one test you can do to see if your electric fan is working or not. Another test you can do is to actually jump the fuse for the electric fan. So you can do that even if the engine is off, the ignition is off. If you jump the fuse, the electric fan should switch on. That's another test you can do. But the test that I did to figure out that this thing is completely broken is I just tried to spin it. If you guys look at the electric fan right here, I'm gonna try to spin it just by hand. And you can see it has a whole lot of resistance. So like, it literally can't spin at all. So when we come to the mechanical fan over on the passenger side, get a good look right there. It spins a lot more freely. Of course, there is still some resistance, but you know, it's definitely not as bad as the electric fan over on that side. That's definitely a problem right there, and probably explains the issue that I've been having with the overheating. Of course, I would say the coolant needs to be flushed or at least topped off, but other than that, the electric fan definitely needs to be replaced. So I know I've been talking about a lot of things that I want to do with this Jeep. Specifically, I know in one of my last videos, I told you guys I wanted to get the whole rear bumper replaced because of the rust. That's probably going to have to sit on the back burner for a little bit. Also wanted to get these bumper end caps replaced with brand new ones, just because they are a little bit faded. But of course, I would rather go ahead and replace the electric fan just to make sure I have one that works. I also want to flush the coolant completely, just to make sure that it's all clean and all good. And then I'm probably also just going to get the thermostat housing, and the water pump replaced as well, because those are parts of the cooling system, and of course everything has to work together. I've actually never looked at the coolant expansion tank, I believe is what it's called, but yeah, I can't even see a level on there, so that's probably pretty low too. So yeah, I mean, that explains all the overheating issues that we've been having on this Jeep. Of course, I think the main issue would be solved by just flushing the coolant and obviously replacing that electric fan. But the electric fan isn't needed until your engine temperature goes above 218, and the coolant should prevent it from doing that. So that's kind of like a backup thing. If the engine gets too hot, then that thing kicks on. So definitely want to have that, but of course number one thing is to flush the coolant first. And I believe this mechanical fan works just fine. If I can try to spin it here. Yeah, I mean, it's not gonna, like, it doesn't spin freely, but it doesn't have any resistance, like not nearly as much resistance as the electric fan does. Now when it comes to the thermostat, it basically opens up at a set temperature. So I believe the stock one is supposed to be 195. I know you can get aftermarket thermostats that open up at 180, and it's supposed to keep your engine a little bit cooler because it opens up at a lower temperature. But I've heard that getting one that's like a lower temperature actually does the opposite of what you would expect. So I think just replacing it with a 195 thermostat would be the best way to go when it comes to actually replacing it. So that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. Then I also want to replace the thermostat housing. As you can see right there, it does have a good bit of corrosion on it, so definitely want to get a brand new one on there. I think that would help and definitely make it look better too. So yeah, I mean, I'm basically here soon. I would like to get the whole cooling system kind of upgraded. So like I said, definitely want to get the coolant flushed, make sure it's all full. Definitely want to get a new electric fan to make sure it actually spins when it's supposed to. Like I said, it's supposed to be on anytime the engine temperature is above 218, anytime your AC is on. And you can test that by taking out your temperature sensor to see if it turns on, or you can jump the fuse with the ignition turned off and it should make the fan turn on. So a few ways to test that out. And after that, of course, I also do want to get the thermostat replaced with a stock 195 thermostat. I've heard that when it comes to the cooling systems on these old Jeeps, it's best to just keep the stock parts. So, you know, I don't want to get a different radiator unless, you know, this one cracks or leaks or has other problems. But even if I do need to replace the radiator, I would probably end up just getting a stock one. Same thing with the thermostat. I'm just going to go ahead and most likely just replace that with a 195 thermostat, and then get a new thermostat housing and a water pump. So same thing applies to the water pump. I know there's one made by Flow Cooler, I think is what the brand is called. They make a water pump for these old Jeeps. It's like a high flow water pump or something. I know some people have said that they work better, and some people have said just stick with the stock water pump. I think most people do prefer just keeping the stock parts on these old Jeeps, especially when it comes to the cooling system. So yeah, I'm basically going to be upgrading the whole cooling system, like I said. Coolant flush, thermostat housing, of course electric fan, water pump, and I think that's it unless I'm missing something. But yeah, whole cooling system I want to upgrade. If you guys have any questions, comments, or any type of suggestions for other upgrades that I should do to this Jeep, make sure to drop those down in the comments below. And if you guys have any video suggestions for videos you would like to see in the future, make sure to also drop those down in the comments below. And if you guys liked this video or found it entertaining, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching.